This is Comic Picks by the Glick.
Yeah, I'm your host, Jason Glick.
Hey, Jason, what do you have on tap for us today?
Well, it's like the all the stuff I wanted to talk about at the it's like in it's like in the end of the year podcast. Well, that seems to be coming like one after the other here because hey, it's like the collected edition for Jonathan Hickman's like Cosmic Events series Imperial has arrived, and I've got some thoughts on it. And yeah, it's like you know, I'm sure after I put two of his series on my 10 best list for 2025, it's like you can probably tell that I'm kind of in the tank for the writer. I mean, he's one of those guys that has delivered like win after win, and at this point, I would say that like he doesn't really deliver bad series for me. Like he is basically delivers something that's less good than others. And so yeah, it's like when I hear that he has been given the task of reinventing Marvel's cosmic series for for the foreseeable future, it's like I want to get in on that. I mean, like him doing a 4-issue event series for this, shoot, shut up and take my money. That's where we are right now. But where we also are right now is in a present day where the 5 different series that were supposed to have been spun out of this series have all either been canceled or just not even made it to the publication stage. Which wow, that's kind of terrible because I get the feeling that that after the success of his X-Men reinvention, Houses of X and Powers of X, and all the series that followed after that, Marvel basically came up to Hickman and basically said, "Hey, that's great, man. Can you do this for our Cosmic series?" And Hickman said, "Sure." It's like, I mean, I got lots of characters I like writing for that. Either like stuff like guys who've already had established cosmic connections like Nova and Star Lord, or tenuous ones like the Hulk, or or also stuff guys that I enjoy writing like Maximus. So so yeah, it's like I so yeah, it's like when so like that, I imagine like the setup here was basically to reinvent Marvel's cosmic landscape in a way that sustained multiple series, and that seems to have not worked out really well because well the She-Hulk series has basically was abruptly canceled with 6 issues. Same with the Nova series as well. The Black Panther title only only made it to 4. The Imperial Guardian series is wrapping up with 5, and the Exile series, well, that didn't even make it to publication. So sorry guys, but it also kind of underlines the fact that Marvel's cosmic series have basically firmly and resolutely been a like a cult object. Like you've got these series like your Guardians of the Galaxies and whatnot that only tend to sustain maybe 1 or 2 series at a time. This has even been the case with even during the Abnett and Landing era, during when they were masterminding it the Annihilation related stuff. And in fact, really the most successful version of Marvel's cosmic side that we've seen has been in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, which I will remind you that Marvel fully expected the first movie to bomb spectacularly, only for it to make over $300 million domestic to the U.S. box office, and far more like world worldwide. So yeah, it's like I think with the benefit of hindsight, you know, Marvel trying to spin 5 different series out of this out of this event was probably needlessly optimistic. And they probably should have just focused on maybe like a Guardians of the Galaxy series, or and as well as a maybe like Imperial Guardians, to focus on the people doing the dirty less superheroic work. like in the event of uh, this series, because wow, it's like you've got like two different like strains of like thought going here. Like one just like that focuses on like the heroic, and one that basically focuses on like the dirty business of managing an intergalactic like empire. Because well, let's start out with the like as like well we get the Imperial starts out with some really ominous talk between like two different unspecified people who basically talking about like how, and one basically says like, how do all these things begin with murder? And while we're not shown who one of them is, the coloring and positioning of them basically kind of implies that holy shit, like, is Mephisto, Marvel brand Satan, getting his like like talons into it's like into like Marvel's cosmic side. Well, the answer is no. But credit to like Hickman and artists like Ivan Coelho and Federico Vincentini, for getting me to at least think that. But basically, it starts out with like the first part of like Imperial starts out with with Hulk, like going back into his like world breaker mode, like from Planet Hulk, and bringing like Jennifer Walters, She Hulk, and Amadeus Cho, like his own Hulk, Brawn, to like out into space because he's found out that because Bruce found out that his cosmic Hulk son Scar or Hirokata has died, or rather been assassinated through murder, or through murder via poison, and that that particular like like strain of death has also destabilized like all of the like politicking that he has done in order to like broker peace throughout this corner of the galaxy. And it's like, and when Hulk like shows up and just tries to like reinstate order here, he also finds out that, well, it turns out that Scar wasn't the only person who has been targeted for assassination in this way. Don't only have two other like rulers of like galactic empires been targeted in this way, but also like the heir to the Spartax Empire has also been targeted as well. And if you think like, well, who are the Spartax? Well, that's the empire that Peter Quill, Star Lord, like is also like ostensibly heir to, and his dad, Jason, like basically like tasks Peter with trying to find out who did this, and Peter quite naturally like goes to like the last surviving Nova, Richard Rider, in order to find out what happened, and this is like really important because Jason is trying to like broker a galactic union, basically getting everyone in all of Marvel's like various like empires and fiefdoms. It's like in order to like on board in order to like, like just basically like broker peace, not just have like the constant wars that just that that spark up like that lead to like like events and just whatnot. Well, so but the problem is that it's like that all of these people are also just chafing under the fact that as they're trying to expand like galactic communications throughout the empire, throughout the universe. Well, the big roadblock here are the Wakandans in the Great Wakandan Empire, and it turns out that they're just basically like not being reasonable in the sense that hey, in order to like like allow for the next creation of the next generation of stargates that will further connect like the reaches of like of the Marvel cosmos. Well, they're basically saying like no, it's like like there are prices here, you will pay them, and then we will provide. And that's basically like led to people just like just gnashing their teeth and just saying fine. It's like how are we going to get the money to pay the Wakandans? They've got the all the vibranium we need in order to like make this happen. So when it's turns out that that when Jason basically like like brings a like a galactic council of all the potential like members of this union, and then like basically says like, hey, one of you here has like is responsible for the assassination of like 4 different heads of state, including potentially my daughter, who is currently in stasis right now awaiting treatment. It's like, what are you doing here? And then he basically like, calls out the combined Kree Skrull alliance led by Hulkling of the new Avengers, only for him to say like, "No, we wouldn't do this. We would know if we did this." And then he's told by one of his like sensors, yeah, actually we did do this because we were like our science guys were contracted to like complete this specific poison." And it's like, and was like, "What the hell, man?" It's like, who did this?" It's like everyone's like, "Yeah, who?" And then before he can answer, of course, he's shot. And and then Jason gets shot as well. And then we find out that, oh wait, the apparent assassin here is someone very Wakandan looking. Who'd have who'd have thought? And when when that information is shared amongst everyone else, well, no one has any problems with going to war against the Great Wakandan Empire. That is the start of like of Imperial. And one of the things, and I think that, what the series does well is that it does deliver on the like big epic scale of things, like like of galactic empires clashing, like of big like agendas, like being played out on a cosmic scale. Hickman does this stuff really well, and he's written a lot of these characters before, like in the pages of Avengers. It's like in other titles, and he does that like really well here. Like for the first three, in the way the collection is structured, for the first 3 issues, it's like you get your big epic cosmic scale, like of conflicts of like everyone just like taking the fight to Wakanda, and then finding out that, oh wow, like there are all sorts of other agendas being pursued here, like amongst the Shi'ar, and amongst the like the Kree and the Skrulls as well. It's like it's it's good stuff. Like Hickman, like I said, Hickman delivers the the scale, like the epic dialogue, the back crazy backstepping plot twists, and Vincentini and Coelho provide like pretty solid art art throughout. And also, um, it's worth noting, like in these first 3 issues, we get the full scale of the scope of the series, because we then find out, well, no, it's not Marvel brand Satan trying to manipulate things. It's someone else that I've already mentioned and will not mention again, because it turns out that one faction of Marvel's cosmos has been felt that they have not been given their due recently, and they need to get their stuff back, and that they have basically engineered all of this in order to like reclaim their place in the Marvel cosmos. So yeah, Imperial is kind of like one big walk back, like regarding this particular faction. Does it work? Well, here's the thing: after you get to like the 3rd issue in the collection, then we get the 5 separate issues of tie-in that were meant to spotlight, like all the different series that were like meant to launch out of Imperial. Now, of like as I mentioned, of the 5, only 4 actually launched with like with Exiles, like the Shi'ar one featuring Professor X and Liliana of the Shi'ar Empire, basically like trying to like shepherd their daughter Rosandra against a Shi'ar coup. Well, that didn't make it, and well, reading the issue itself, it's like it's not bad. It's like, in fact, I wouldn't mind seeing it's like a series that basically like, had them trying to like get their daughter back into her rightful place with it's like with Corsair, da- Danger, and Kid Gladiator and Rocket Raccoon like helping her out. It's like that seemed like fun, and it's too bad that we won't get to see it, but I'm sure there will be nods to it, like in it's like in the future. As for the other one shots here, the Black Panther one shot, well, actually, like all most of them do kind of suffer from their collection here because they're not really telling you like self-contained stories. They're just kind of issue zero for series that like were yet to come. That's especially true of the Black Panther storyline from Victor Laval with art by Kafu. That basically has him just like dealing with the like the invasion of Hulk and Amadeus Cho on his ship. In fact, like all of these one shots do actually do a good job, continuing on the story from like issue 3 of Imperial. So I appreciate the fact that they are collected here, if nothing else. But but Black Panther, basically just doesn't really tell a self-contained story. In fact, it's just like it's a whole lot of setup, like leading into its series, which lasted all of 4 issues. It's like I imagine like it's decent enough setup, but it's kind of like depressing to look at this and go, wow, it's like it just did not catch on, which is too bad. But then you got Planet She-Hulk, which lasted at least 6 issues. In fact, Stephanie Phillips got through her first storyline before having to completely change course with the 6th issue, which she just said she described in the interview as like, oh, it's the magic of comics, which is I can imagine like she said with maximum sarcasm as well. But this issue here is actually pretty fun as Jennifer Walters has to accommodate herself to the to the to how the things are run on Sakara and Novo after one of its rulers is murdered, and like she has to find out who done it, only to find out that maybe finding out who done it doesn't really matter at all in terms of the grand scale of things. It's a good solid one off with some nice art from Emilio Liso, but like yeah, so I guess it does make me kind of at least curious to see how things would have gone in her series. So maybe I will pick up her one volume of Planet She-Hulk, but or maybe I won't. Who knows? Then you've got Nova Centurion, which we see tries to reestablish Richard Rider's connection to the to the Nova to the Nova world mind, and and Jim McKay has to deal with a lot of continuity like here like just dealing with what happened when he dumped his the previous world mind into the Cancerverse, and just try to set things up as to where he's going to take Nova's story from here. Even though this is probably the most Imperial issue 3.5 of the storylines collected here, because at the end of when you get to issue 3, he basically says like I know who did it, and then the issue goes on to say here's who did it, and then his storyline just takes you through the mental workings of that, and then leaves you with the people who done it, just saying, "Hey, here we are, come to save you all." So, yeah, it's like I like Jeff Hickman this is a co-writer on all of these issues, and I imagine his name is just here just to make sure that none of them necessarily contradicted his plans for the final issue, and that's fine. But in the end, this is a this is like more of a interstitial issue between the events of the of the series rather than a solid story in its own right. Then you've got the Imperial Guardians issue, which is also kind of not necessarily it is kind of a story in its own right, but it's also just when that kind of ends without foreshadowing a lot of stuff, because basically you've got Gamora and Darkhawk trying to figure out like what like what trying to fight against the forces that are like allied against the formation of the Galactic Union, because she believes in Peter's belief in his dad's belief in the Galactic Union, and hey, like Captain Marvel is here too, so that's cool and all. And also this does set up a explain like a key part of the like other series, basically why the scrolls are so invested in it's like in this series as well. And if you've read like Secret Invasion, this basically like draws on a lot of like like the religious world building from there, basically in the fact that like the scroll goddess Varanki, well, it's like she may have come back and is basically telling the scrolls to just not accept their place in the current Kree scroll empire, like post the Empire series by Al Ewing and Dan Slott. So yes, like I did enjoy this this issue because it did offer some like interesting backstory, and it also featured like like a key schemer employing the services of one Francis Castle, aka Cosmic Ghost Rider, to see things through here. So yeah, I did enjoy this, and that all leads into the final issue, which basically tries to suggest that like in the end once the like because like, basically like the final issue basically like contends that the biggest threat here is the renewed religious fervor of the scrolls, fighting against like their Kree, like their current Kree partnership, and like now they're just like trying to like like just reestablish their own empire as well. But it's like, hey, like there is a like all there's like one other faction here that's also fighting against that, and they may have orchestrated everything, including the Skrulls rebellion, in order to like serve their further interest. And that's what Nova, like Star Lord, and also like Black Panther's sister Shuri, because hey, she got involved in this as well. Like they're trying to figure out, what they figured out what happened, but before they can, uh, like explain what did. Well, turns out that the threat was like, was solved before they could do that. And well, rather than just destabilize the Galactic Union, everyone else has basically decided, fine, we're just going to go ahead with it and just accept things as they are. So so basically like, the finale like of Imperial basically asks you to like accept that hey, like the cost of doing business is bigger than like the like like justice being done to those involved, and maybe it will be done at some point, but uh, I don't know. It's like, I mean, I see what Hickman was trying to do here. I don't necessarily feel that it was like makes for like an inherently satisfying like end to this series. It's like, I mean, like yeah, it's like I get it, but like seeing how like knowing what I know now about like the future of Marvel's cosmic like titles, especially in the wake of the fact that like they're all canceled now. I just kind of wonder, like, hey, what's the point after all? I mean, like, I assume that like at some point someone else is going to like like try and like do another like Guardians of the Galaxy series, like going forward, but and then they'll have to like deal with this as well, and whether or not what's done in Imperial has any lasting significance. Ah, that's a good question, all because Marvel's cosmic side has always been really tricky to manage. This is it's got a fan base, but it's like that fan base is like more cult than anything else, and all of like Marvel's attempts to try and grow that fan base just yeah haven't worked out really. So Imperial is definitely a really impressive effort to try and like like grow it into like something that's really dramatically satisfying. And yeah, it's like I did enjoy what was done here. And also it's like, like I think that, like for all the stuff that's collected here, $35, like less if you can get it through like through some deep discounts like I did, then yeah, it's like this is a like Imperial is a good solid story in and of itself, but it also seems that it did not quite crack the code in terms of like, making Marvel's cosmic stuff um like palatable to like a wider segment of the comics reading audience, which it seems like that's what it was trying to do in the first place. So on one hand, yeah, that's disappointing, but overall, it's like I did enjoy reading it, and in terms of like how Hickman stuff goes, I mean this is definitely like I wouldn't say this is like least good. I mean it's still good, but it's like if you're just looking for something that is trying to like like chart a course forward for this notoriously cult segment of like Marvel's like universe, and it doesn't quite work, I guess. But I still enjoyed it. It was fun, but hey, expect a another like Imperial sized reboot in maybe another 2 3 years or so, because that's how these things go.
All right. Well, do you know what you're going to be talking about next time?
Well, it's like it turns out that the time we've been talking, Chainsaw Man has reached its final end, and I've got some thoughts on it, and you know who else has thoughts on it?
Ooh.
Steve. So yeah,
Ah,
it's like assuming like our schedule aligns, Steve will be back to talk about like our thoughts on the end of Chainsaw Man, which like I'm
yeah.
sad it's gone. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. And we'll catch you next time on Comic Picks by the Clay.
Later, everyone.
Bye.